Welcome to Patty's Place, a place where we're going to talk about grief, dementia, and caregiving. This podcast is in honor of my mom, Pat, who passed away from dementia about 2.5 years ago now. I'm your host, Lisa, and this is a place where you'll know that you're not alone. So grab your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, or if you're having a really bad day, a glass of wine, and we will get talking today. Today, I'm very excited about our guest. It's Dr. Wong he's a clinical professor with the University of Hawaii School of Medicine. And you focus on geriatric services and designed for the senior segmentation. So I'm very excited. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm happy to be on Patty's Place.
Yes, I think there's just so much to talk about. You're also the founder of geriatric services at Kaiser Permanente in Hawaii. Is that correct?
That's right. And I'm retired from Kaiser, but I was part of their national planning committee. So.
Oh, okay. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, what drew you to specialize in geriatric medicine?
Well, I've been at it for 40 years, and even before I ever applied to med school, I was really drawn to care of seniors, and it was a way of both serving the community that I felt affinity to. That I'm Chinese American, and I felt a strong affinity to my hometown, Chinatown, San Francisco, Chinatown. And there were some very innovative things being done back then. And I was thrilled to experience working in a team with one of the original PACE sites, or the actual original PACE site called Unlock in San Francisco. And I just really enjoyed the more holistic way of providing care for seniors, not just putting them in nursing homes. So,
and what is the PACE program?
The PACE program is a national program. It started in San Francisco at Unlock. Unlock is Chinese for peace and happiness, and it's a program that people enroll in and get all their services, both traditional Medicare services and an expanded set of support services, while continuing to live in the community. And there's a lot of emphasis on them being at a day health center to get services during the day. While they're at the day health center, they can get physical therapy, a lot of recreational therapy, socialization, and your providers are right there. So it would be typical for a person to be involved in activities, and if I wanted to see the person, that person would just be wheeled into a separate area, and we would do a short clinic visit. Or once in a while, I would just drop by into the activities area and just feel the person's pulse, just to make sure that person was doing fine. And that's the way the PACE sites work. They're all across the country now. It's a Medicare benefit for people who qualify, and there are a large number of Medicare programs across the country, PACE programs across the country now.
Oh, okay. And in your opinion, how should healthcare for seniors evolve to better meet their unique needs?
Well, I think it really needs dramatic change in terms of not just thinking about disease, but thinking about the person, how it impacts the person, and how to optimally provide, quality of life, dignity, and respect for older people. And I'll give you a very specific example of that, Lisa, is that throughout the country, when you call your physician, it'll pretty much end with a comment: if you have any kind of emergency, please call 911.
Right.
Well, that doesn't really serve a lot of older people very well. I mean, if you're a frail older person, I always like to make the point that if you're frail and elderly, calling 911 can be a one-way call. And by that I mean it's invariably that if you're about age of 85 or older, if you go to the emergency room, there's a 50% chance you're going to be hospitalized.
Oh,
And once you're
okay.
hospitalized, there's about a 50% chance you're not going to go straight back home.
Oh,
You're going
I
to
did
end
not
up,
know that.
uh,
Okay.
yeah. So it's not the most supportive way. And, a lot of older people say, please don't send me to the emergency room. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And they're legitimate reasons.
Yeah. I wasn't aware of that statistics. Can we talk a
Yeah.
little bit about like cultural expectations, like the language barrier and maybe the prejudice that plays the role for caregivers? I know you highlighted this in your future book coming out that you sent me some information on it. But I think that cultural
Well,
expectations plays a role in things.
yeah. So, you know, uh, it would be really great if we talk about the importance of support for caregivers.
Yes.
Um, and, the whole concept is that, the traditional healthcare system, you go to a physician and you're always expecting a medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as you know, Lisa, uh, medicines for Alzheimer's disease and dementia in general are only modestly effective at most.
Yes.
And I like to make the point that the best medicine for a person who lives with dementia and for the caregiver is to get support. And that's more effective than just getting a medicine from your doctor. And there's some cultural aspects of that is in that, many people who are older have, come from different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and getting support means a lot of different things. A lot of caregivers feel like within their culture that it's their obligation,
Mm-hmm.
um, and asking for help from other people and imposing that help from other people on a person who a frail older person is not what is expected. It's expected within culture that it's done within the family, and
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some things that need to be overcome with that.
Yeah, I think that is hard because I know when with my mom when she was in memory care, uh, there were I got to know different family members of other patients, other residents, and that came up. The one woman, she was like, yeah, she was Hispanic, and she said it was just in the culture that she was supposed to take care of her mom, and she had to fight her brothers because her mom was getting into cars with people she didn't know, and like they just kept saying, well, you can take care of her, and she's like, no, I can't, I need help, and she struggled with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think?
So, what are your thoughts, Lisa? Did you seek out help in caring for your for Patty?
Well, I noticed my mom was wasn't herself for quite a while, and I tried to get her help, and she refused to go to the doctor. I even had her at our primary doctor, who she knew and loved for years. She refused to take the simple little memory test. She just would not take it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Uh
she
huh.
just and I think on some level she knew something wasn't right, but if you brought it up to her, she got very upset. So finally, when she didn't know who my dad and I were in the house, I told my dad we have to do something. And luckily, my parents had done powers of attorney. And this was all during COVID as well, of course. And we took my mom to the emergency room with the power of attorney, and they diagnosed her right away with dementia, and they diagnosed her with moderate to severe. She lived with me for a month, and that as we were trying to find a place for her because they told us we weren't going to be able to take care of her at home because she was very mobile still, even though which was highly unusual for the state of her dementia. So
Yeah.
it did. It took a while, and it was very overwhelming because I was like, I don't know where to go. What do I do? Like what's the best place for that? With that, so
Well, it's interesting. You raised so many points there right away. One point is that and that's a whole different subject, but how people are so afraid of memory loss. They're afraid of memory loss in a way that they're not afraid of a failing heart or
Mm-hmm.
failing kidneys. They're much more afraid of a failing brain, and I think those kinds of fears actually make the problem worse, not better.
Yeah, and my dad had a very hard time. He just kept telling me, oh, she's fine and it's just age. And I was like, something's not right. And so I struggled for a long
Mm,
time. So in many ways, I feel like I lost my mom years before I actually lost her, because I could just tell she
yeah,
wasn't. And people came to me and said, something's not right with your mom. And I was like, I know, but I can't get her to go. Even though as you said previously, there's really not a lot of medications. There's not much they can do for it with that.
hmm,
So you talked about too that people with dementia, they resist a lot of new routines. So what advice can you give the caregiver for that? Because I noticed that with my mom about with that.
yeah. Well, there's the emotional dimension to people who are starting to um, lose memory, and there's less a feeling of comfort and security.
Mm-hmm.
So the space that a person feels comfortable becomes smaller and smaller, and and there's more and more anxiety about unfamiliar situations. So um, that is something that needs to be dealt with. So
And I did
get
notice
back.
that with my mom, like she didn't want to go out as much, like even to the grocery store, where my dad ended up going to the grocery store more and more. Um,
Mhm.
and then even when she was in memory care, little by little, she didn't want to come out of her room anymore. So I did notice
Yeah,
that she just didn't want to do it anymore. Like I could tell that's where she felt safe. And
yeah.
with that, so
Well,
would you? Oh, go ahead.
well, underneath all that is the subject of trust,
Mm-hmm.
um, and trust. If it's important to build up as much trust as possible, and it's very similar to building trust in a child. If a child trusts you, they're willing to do more, and trust is something that's really important when people are seeking out to move things along.
I was going to say that is very true because there were different times with my mom that I knew she trusted me, even though she didn't know who I was, even in memory care. She would get very upset with showers. She did not like getting showers, and she would like get so upset. And if I was there, she would like grab onto my hand and be like, "Please don't leave me, please don't leave me." And I didn't. And sometimes it took me over an hour to calm her down with things, but it was like I knew she trusted me. So,
Yeah, and it's really interesting that there's a lot of uncertainty when you're taking care of a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and every day is different. There may be a day in which everything seems fine, and it's a green light for things, and other
mhm.
days in which it's a yellow light, and other days in which it's a red light. When it's a red light, you may as well not try. Uh,
Yeah.
the skill is when it's a yellow light and turning that yellow light to a green light. And sometimes what you find is that you can't get things done, but sometimes, for whatever reason, somebody else can get things done, which gets back to the whole issue of why support is so important
And
and getting different people to help out.
yeah, because sometimes I used to be able to get my mom to change her pants when she'd have accidents, and then after a while she wouldn't let me do it, but a caregiver could do it for her, with it, ones that she knew and she liked. with that. Uh, do you have
Yeah, the
any idea?
relationships in life really change when a support system gets put in place.
Yeah,
And sometimes you may be the most familiar person and less likely, less able to get things done than someone who's less familiar, but somehow seems to be in a different role. So that's why it takes a whole team.
yeah, it definitely does. Do you have any insight as to why people with dementia don't like to take showers, like on the in any
Uh,
medical side of it?
well, there's that is a very common
Mm-hmm.
problem, and my own personal opinion is that it's a very it's not it's in the more in the primitive areas of the brain about the relationship between living in water and fear of water and
Oh,
um, that being in an environment that being surrounded by water is something that people start to feel a fear of.
well, my mom always had a fear of water, so that would explain a lot for my mom with that. And you mentioned before that it takes a village, and I know that's one of your. Is that going to be the title of your book, or is that was the title of the one chapter? So let's talk about. You have a book coming
It's
out soon.
it's a theme in that one chapter. I think the title
Okay.
of my book will relate to GOLD, GOLD, which
Okay.
is an acronym for getting older with love and dignity.
Oh.
And you
Okay.
know, when you talk about the healthcare system, uh, does it really help people get older with love and dignity? I would say, if you look at the way things are actually done. Um, in some ways, yes, but in many ways, no.
I would agree with that. And you have a lot of information that you had sent me. So you said that there's some uh, Medicare has some new initiative guide. For where could people find some of that? Because that's very overwhelming too with Medicare.
Yeah, so um, there's a new program from Medicare called GUIDE, GUIDE,
Okay.
and it's not available everywhere, but it was created because there was a broad understanding that uh, the traditional healthcare system doesn't really provide for the needs of people who have dementia, especially as it gets more severe. And with the guide program, and you need to do a little bit of a search for the Medicare guide program, and they will actually tell you sites in which it's offered. It's only offered via traditional Medicare fee for service, which means that if
Okay.
you have a Medicare Advantage plan, they won't offer it. But it's being rolled out across the country. And what it does is it does something that the healthcare system doesn't do now. Uh, for instance, one thing it will do is that 24 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
it will provide uh, uh, on-call services. So if you have any question, somebody is on the other end of the line who actually knows the person's record and history and has expertise in dementia care. And that's 24/7. And then for certain people who
Okay.
qualify, they will actually get some in-home services as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
that is an
That
innovative
is
program, yeah, that's being rolled out across the United States, but it's not well developed in many sites yet. Um,
okay.
but it is something that is important. It is only specifically for people with dementia. They also offer sometimes some degree of respite services, and they offer
Okay.
training and education for caregivers.
Oh, well, it's just important because I think the more training and education a
Yeah,
caregiver
so
gives.
it's much better than what exists now in general for people
Mhm.
with dementia and their caregivers.
That's good to know. with it because it's so overwhelming. You also mentioned about care navigation and care coordination. What is that?
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Okay.
So it's pretty traditional. I don't know if your mom Patty was ever in the hospital, Lisa, but it's very very typical that after a person is discharged or in the process of being discharged from a hospital, it's a little bit overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of things have changed. A person may become maybe significantly less physically capable, and people will say, "How come mom's being discharged from the hospital? She isn't well yet." And the
Mm-hmm.
answer is, "Well, that's not the purpose of an acute care hospital. The purpose of an acute care hospital is to just get them out of the woods for now, to get them out of their acute illness."
Mm-hmm.
And when the person is discharged from either a nursing home or from a hospital, a lot of questions is, uh, where do we go from here? And the typical response is, well, this is what you need to do. And they'll give you
Right.
a list and said, you need to do this, you need to do this, and you need to do this. That is called care navigation. It's widely available. It's done in most hospitals throughout the country. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things hospitals are rated on is, did you tell the family what to do? That's a lot different from helping the family do it.
That's
And
true.
that's what care coordination is. And so care
Okay.
coordination, when you look at it, is not widely available. And that
Okay.
is one of the things that the Medicare Guide program really helps with. It doesn't just tell you what to do, but it helps you get things done. And it's a little bit overwhelming for most caregivers to say, just get a piece of paper. Well, you need to do this, 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 and this,
It,
and
it was overwhelming.
and that's a lot
Yeah.
different from care coordination, which says, well, this is what needs to be done. Would it be okay if I help you do it? And I'll help you coordinate this. I'll help you set this up. That's not typically available from hospitals. It is available sometimes from specialized programs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, in some places, like if they have a memory care uh, clinic in a major hospital, sometimes they'll do things like that. It's very similar to what happens when a person has cancer, that they will actually coordinate care. They will make sure that care is seamless. They won't just give you instructions. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
big difference between navigation and coordination. And that's a big gap in our healthcare system.
I would agree with that. Yeah, because
Yeah.
they gave me, here, and I had to do pretty much all of it on my own. You also talked about dementia villages and memory cafes. I know is it Finland that they have like a dementia village? But you said that there's some places in the United States are starting to possibly do this.
Yeah, it's a concept that was started in Holland and has been replicated in which people live in very safe environments. Um, they become eligible when they have dementia, and the safe environments are environments that feel very familiar to them, and so it might be something that feels stuck in time.
Mm-hmm.
Now. It's an interesting concept, and they've also had some similar efforts in Japan, um, and in the United States. There is one site that is preparing that. I think those are interesting things. I don't think they're those things are definitely not widespread in the United States, but the memory cafes are also a concept that is somewhat familiar in the United States. You need to Google search it, but various sites will have little social meetings in which people with memory problems get together and either have activities or just talk about things from the past. So,
And I have to say, sometimes it was quite entertaining listening to uh, two or three different dementia patients talk. Because like they talked about all kinds of things and you just followed along with them. And sometimes it was funny just listening to them. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like it was just entertaining and like you just listened and went along with them and I would laugh, uh, for it.
Yeah.
You also talk about these concepts of doing to, doing for, or doing with, and you recommend doing with. Can you explain that for people?
Yeah. So doing two is something that the healthcare system, again, uh, does too often to people who are frail and elderly. Doing two means if you have an emergency, call 911, because
Okay.
doing two means that it's not something that is very friendly or supportive of dignity. Um, and it actually imposes something on a person that the person may not actually want. Um,
Okay.
so a very typical example of doing two is putting a person in a nursing home.
Mhm.
So there's the double whammy that you become frail and elderly, and you may have memory problems, and then on top of that, you're instead of being supported with all those challenges, you're put in a nursing home, which is probably one of the reasons that people don't like to be diagnosed as having memory problems, because of the fear that this is what's going to be done to them. Now,
I could see that. Yeah.
to them is worse than for them, which is a lot of times people will say, well, this is good for you.
Mhm.
You need to do this. And people say, well, this is good for you. Take a shower, get a bath. This is good for you.
Mhm.
And it is good for them, uh, but it's not something that they really necessarily really want to do.
Mhm.
And the optimal is when a person is able to do something that says, I'm doing this with you, so that the person feels like this is helpful to me as well. Now, it's it's an ideal goal is doing things with a person, um, but um, I think it needs to be thought of. So when it comes to, for instance, like what are we going to do with mom as she gets into a more advanced stage, or what are we going to do with mom when uh, when it's just becoming overwhelming in various ways?
Mhm.
People have to make decisions, and they have to think a little bit. Are we doing this to her, for her, or with her? And you really want as much as possible to do things with her. It's not always possible, but certainly you really want to avoid doing things to a person, which means for your benefit, but not really something they wanted. And as a geriatrician, uh, that's a conceptual framework, but what it actually means in specific situations needs to be tailored. For
Mhm.
instance, you were saying, Lisa, that despite your mom having a significant degree of cognitive impairment dementia, she was still able to walk. And
Yes.
so, an intervention that's tailored to her is a lot different from an intervention that's tailored to somebody who can't walk. And of course, somebody
Mhm.
who walks, one of the common, specific issues that comes up is wandering. And how do you manage
Yes.
that?
Yes, and she did. She got out twice in one night when she was living with me in the house, and I was right there when she did it. I mean, she was fast, and luckily I caught her. She only got to like my neighbor's driveway, and is like in the middle of the night, and she just thought she was gonna go visit, and I was like, no, 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 we need to come in. But it is really scary when that happens. I see how easily.
And yeah, the Alzheimer's Association really talks a lot about wandering, and it's Lisa. You mentioned how scary it is, and it's scary for a reason. The
Mhm.
statistics actually are really concerning. If a person gets lost for more than 24 hours, you can't find them
Mhm.
for 24 hours. There's a good probability that there's a major injury.
Okay.
So if you don't find a person within the first 24 hours, it's definitely a situation in which the outcomes become more and more problematic. So that's why when somebody gets lost, it's important to and there's a different chapter in my book about special situations that it's really important to seek out help right away, and uh, you really want to find a person within the first hour. Uh, it gets more and more difficult to find a person as the time passes.
I would believe that because they don't know where they are in that. So, but yeah, that was very, very scary. And I remember calling my dad at 4:30 in the morning, and he came like a few hours later, and he changed the lock on my door and all that. But I didn't sleep well because I knew, what if she got out through the patio door and stuff like that. So it was very scary. So what do you know when your book will be coming out?
Uh, there's a good, it's taken me years,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a good chance it's going to come out this year.
Okay.
Um, the chapter that I shared with you is about what kinds of support exist. And that chapter, there were a number of different things I delved into. One is that, it's important for everybody to get support. But there's a large number of people who really hesitate to get support, and there's a lot of different reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also talk about the different kinds of support that exist. And there's a lot of evidence that people who reach out for support, the outcome's a lot better. The outcome's better for the caregiver, and the outcome's actually better for the patient as well. Um, Caregivers who get support do much more better on their own uh, emotional, physical um, well-being, and are able to lead lives that still feel a lot more connected. And for patients, when support is in place, they actually are able to live at home a lot significantly longer. So.
And I did. You had a lot of good information on in there. You had uh were people books that you recommended, different things they could watch or listen to. You also said there's a best practice caregiving database that people could have access to as well.
Yes, yeah, and again, it does need to be tailored, and part
Mhm.
of it is that everybody's different. Like some people will readily reach out for help, other
Mhm.
people are, for a lot of different reasons, maybe cultural, maybe feeling like this is my responsibility. Some people feel like I can do this better than anybody else. Um, some people just feel overwhelmed. Some people feel um, that. They're that that the help out there is not really that good. So
Mhm.
a lot of people approach it in many different ways. And my message is always take a first step, no matter how small it is. If you want to just start out with a really small step, that's fine. But it's really important to seek some sort of help. Just the same way that for your mom, she was not willing to take that first step of actually getting evaluated. But taking a small step, and then even if it doesn't lead you immediately to the best tailored intervention, the best tailored support, it gets you started,
Mhm.
and then you kind of tailor it from them. And a lot of times when people have at the early stages, they mostly want education, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. So things such as your podcast. There's some uh, websites that just provide information. Alzheimer's Association is wonderful for that. Um,
Mhm.
and there are some sites that provide structured trainings that are either on your own timeline, like you go through different modules about managing this, managing that, managing financial issues, managing behavioral issues, um, managing wandering. And then there are more structured courses that say, well, on this day, we're going to talk about this, we'll discuss it on this day. And so you just pick out what works best for you. There's the educational aspect, and then which your podcast is mostly educational. Then there's others that are more about caregiver support, emotional support,
Mm-hmm.
support groups and people chat together. And I belong to some of those. Um, uh, and support groups are really good. People, once they start, they really find a sense of being able to talk with people who are in the similar situations to them. But what I find is that a lot of people hesitate to ever get involved in a support group. And then, then other things like you've done, Lisa, is which actually get hands-on support. You got your mom into a memory care unit and stuff like that. And so there's different kinds of things that you can try. And of course, because it's very individualized because for instance, there's more resources in urban settings than there are in rural settings. In urban
Mm-hmm.
settings, you might actually find programs that are readily available, whereas in rural settings, you might need to just get more help online. Um, and then there's always also the financial issues. I mean,
Yes,
if
that's a
you
big
have a
one.
significant amount of money, it's gonna help a lot. If you don't have money, though, you should not just give up and say, there's no help for me.
Right.
The Alzheimer's Association is very good for that with the helpline with live people that say, how can I get help? In every region in the United States, there's the area offices on aging, and they're usually more knowledgeable about what actually exists in specific areas. But it does take that first reaching out, and part of what I find is that people are just so overwhelmed with just what they're doing that they really don't have any time to even reach out for that little bit of help that would actually make a difference. But they're drowning basically in their
Mm-hmm.
immediate day-to-day activities that even reaching out. And the analogy I use is, somebody's in the water and they're afraid of drowning, and they're um, moving their hands and their legs, and somebody in a rescue boat comes out and says, just grab my hand, and they won't grab the hand because they're just so busy just trying to stay alive that they
Mm-hmm.
don't reach that hand. I just really want to make people recognize that that's the critical time they need to reach out when they're at what I call the red light zone, when
Mm-hmm.
they're not sleeping well, when they're not eating well, when they feel totally isolated, when they're turning to sleeping pills and alcohol and drugs and just uh, uh, feeling like totally overwhelmed. That
Mm-hmm.
is a big red light sign. That is exactly the time you desperately need to reach out for help. And the help, it's there. I'm not saying it's always easy to find, but it's there. You just have to take that first step and just reach out.
I would agree with that because all the time we spend on, Instagram or Facebook or any of the other social media sites just doing silly stuff, you could take that 5 minutes, and even if you start with like the Alzheimer's Association, and or calling the helpline just little by little, even if you do it for 5 minutes every couple days, it helps a lot. And I would agree with you. And even, support groups, sometimes in the memory care facilities, they have a support group there. um, I was never really a support group type person, but now I go to a few of them, and it helps just because I know that there's people there that understand what I'm going through. They understand the feeling, and a lot of times you don't even have to say anything. If you're somebody that doesn't want to participate, you could just sit there and then later on just talk with a person, and it just helps. You don't feel so alone with that. So you think,
That sounds really great, Lisa. That's exactly right.
and so
And this
you
whole point you make is you don't have to say anything. I think that's a really important point.
yeah, you don't. You could just listen and then talk to somebody later. So we look forward to your book coming out. So it's Gold. Is that going to be the name of it?
Well,
We're
we're
not sure
working on
yet.
it, but the
We're working on.
concept of gold, getting
Okay.
older with love and dignity, and we have a long way to go. I sometimes think about geriatrics as being the mirror image of pediatrics, and when people have Alzheimer's or dementia, there's an analogy to children with special needs and
Mm-hmm.
autism and issues like that. And there's a very strong community in the pediatric world. Um, the community for seniors is not nearly as strong, and we need to get there.
Yes, I would agree with that. We really do. So, so I hope we get to see your book out soon then. At least
Okay,
this year.
thanks so much,
Yes.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you so much
Okay,
for joining us. So I hope you enjoyed this edition of Patty's Place. So hope you enjoyed your cup of tea, your cup of coffee, or if you're having that really bad day, your glass of wine. Make sure you leave us a review or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And just so you know that you're not alone in all of this, we're here in this together, and hope you enjoy us for another edition of Patty's Place.